leftovers, or the DMV,
Number 97,
or house cleaning, or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Thank you for joining me for a very special Memorial Day episode of War and Family Letters Home. My name is Lauren Muse, and I have a passion for history and genealogy, looking beyond the names and dates to who people were and where they were at certain points in time. This episode is being recorded Memorial Day weekend 2022. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Memorial Day, its history, and its meaning. In 1868, 3 years after the Civil War, Commander-in-Chief John Logan of the Grand Army of the Republic issued a general order setting aside May 30th as Decoration Day. The purpose was for the decorating of graves of all who died in the defense of our country in that war. It wasn't until 1971 when the federal government sought to standardize holidays to Mondays that the name of the holiday was changed to Memorial Day and the observance to the last Monday in May. It was also decided to extend the honor to all military that died in all wars. The difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day is that Veterans Day honors all who serve our country. Memorial Day is to honor those that made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country. One such hero is Lieutenant Phillip Ralph Harris, U.S. Navy pilot. This episode will also be different because, well, you see, I don't have a letter written by Lieutenant Harris or an artifact whatsoever from that time that he served in the war. What I do have is a wooden box that I found in an antique store in Newburyport, Massachusetts about a year ago. I'm usually on the lookout for letters, but for some reason this box caught my attention and I had to have a closer look. The box is clearly handmade, the craftsmanship is very nice, and the top is removable, and it sits on it perfectly. It's stained a light oak color, and its dimensions are 20 inches long, 10 inches wide, and 10 inches high. When you take the lid off and look on the inside, on the left you see a B+, and on the right is written, "Made by Phillip Harris, Shop Project, High School, son of Ralph and Grace, brother of Donna, Walworth County, Wisconsin. Navy pilot, lost over the Pacific, World War II." I didn't know what I would do with it, but I couldn't leave it there on the dusty shelf. I paid the asking price for it and brought it home to research. Phillip Harris was born July 13, 1920, to Ralph and Grace Harris of Wisconsin. He was the oldest of 2 children, having a younger sister, Donna, and the family lived and worked on a farm in Walworth, Wisconsin. In the 1940 census, the family was still on this farm, and Phillip is noted as being 19 years old and a senior in high school. Now, usually, about this time in the podcast, I would talk about Phillip's draft registration form. However, I couldn't locate Phillip's, but I was able to find a photo of him, albeit a black and white photo, but he appears to have been thin, fair-skinned, with dark hair. He volunteered in the Naval Air Corps in the fall of 1941 and received training in both Illinois and Corpus Christi, Texas, where he received his wings on September 25, 1942. He was 22 years old. On May 29, 1943, Phillip married Doris Margaret Connor of San Diego, California, before being deployed to the Pacific as a pilot of a Coronado. The Coronado was basically a large flying boat. It had no landing gear and was designed to be a patrol bomber. The plane towered to 27 feet tall and had a wingspan of 115 feet, and it weighed about 68,000 pounds and had 4 props. The plane was armed with machine guns and a nose turret, and on either side of the plane and in the tail. The bombs were delivered through bomb bays that were underneath the wings, and the plane could be armed with up to 1,000 pounds of bombs. To successfully drop the bombs, the plane had to fly in low, which was a problem because the plane was also very slow in the air and had a range of slightly over 1,000 miles. There were other problems with the Coronado, one being that the pilots had to have rags handy to clear the water off the windshields upon landing. And more importantly, the planes had a propensity to leak. When they made hard landings, crewmen would have pencils ready, and they would stick them in the holes to stop the leaks. For the problems noted above, the Coronado was not really up to the task of being a patrol bomber, and was mostly relegated to intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and basically scouting sorties. The Coronados had no landing gear, as we mentioned previously, so the plane had to remain offshore, and it would tie up to ships that acted as tenders. The tender for Lieutenant Harris's crew was the USS Kenneth Whiting, which, on the fateful night, was anchored in the bay off Coronado, which was about 15 miles away from Okinawa. On May 9, 1945, just around the time that Germany surrendered, bringing the war towards a close in Europe, Lieutenant Harris and his crew of 10 men ran into trouble. This is an official naval account of the incident. On May 9, 1945, Lieutenant Harris and his crew were returning from a patrol and arrived in the middle of an air raid. The base at General Quarters was under smoke, a defensive action due to enemy aircraft in the area, and the base ordered them back until it was safe to return. About 14 hours in the air, the Coronado's fuel state was critical. Now 0300 on May 10th, Lieutenant Harris attempted an open sea night landing 10 miles south of Coronado. It is surmised that when they made first contact with the water, they were so low on fuel that the first touch on the water must have bounced the plane to a high deck angle, which prevented the low fuel supply from reaching the engines. The second contact with the water, without power, was so violent that the plane broke up. There were 3 survivors rescued from the sea that night. Co-pilot Lieutenant Junior Grade James Fleming Wright, Aviation Machinist Mate 3rd Class David Lucius Collins, Aviation Ordnanceman 3rd Class Walter Raymond Costin, Jr. The rest of the crew were reported missing, and their bodies were never found. Navigator Ensign Cecil Mark Henley, age 23, of Tennessee. Aviation Machinist Mate 3rd Class William Walter Brownlee, age 21, of Montana. Aviation Machinist Mate Bernard Frederick Fallon, age 23, of New York. Aviation Radioman 3rd Class David Marvin Freshman, age 20, of New York. Aviation Radioman 3rd Class William Wirt Hughes, age 28, of Missouri. Aviation Radioman 3rd Class William Keith Vincent, age 26, of Arkansas. Aviation Ordnanceman 3rd Class Carl Claiborne Crew, age 21, of Louisiana. His daughter was to turn 1 year old 2 weeks later. And of course, Pilot Lieutenant Phillip Ralph Harris, age 25, of Wisconsin. I found a newspaper article published in the Delavan Enterprise on May 25th, 1945. I'd like to read it to you, but please remember the facts surrounding the crash had not been officially released yet, and therefore there are some incorrect details. While it has not been officially announced by the War Department, it is believed that Lieutenant Philip R. Harris, son of Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Harris, and one of the most popular young men of the community, lost his life over Okinawa on May 10th when the plane he was in was attacked by Japanese aircraft and crashed into the sea. A close friend of Lieutenant Harris wrote to his wife telling her that Lieutenant Harris was in the plane which dove into the sea and that he was dead. The information has been related to the flyer's parents, who now live in Janesville, but as yet no word has come from the War Department. Lieutenant Harris had spent nearly 2 years in the Pacific as a pilot of a Coronado, a Navy patrol bomber, when he returned to Delavan last December with his wife to visit at the home of his parents. At that time, he was stationed in Saipan. He volunteered for the Naval Air Corps in the fall of 1941 and received his training in Glenview, Illinois. He received his wings September 25, 1942 in Corpus Christi, Texas, and after that was stationed at San Diego, California, and flew over most parts of the Pacific which were in the possession of Americans up until last Christmas. He married Miss Doris Margaret Connor of San Diego, California on May 29, 1943. Lieutenant Harris was a graduate of Delavan High School and attended the Milwaukee School of Engineering and was a graduate of Marion Institute, Marion, Alabama. Lieutenant Harris was stationed in the States until some time ago when he again left for the Pacific area. His folks had not known that he was in the Okinawa area until they received the unofficial word of his death. He is the 23rd boy from this area to lose his life in World War II. Pilot Lieutenant Philip Ralph Harris, killed in action approximately 6 years after creating a handsome wooden box for his shop project in his high school in Wisconsin. And 76 years later, the box was found by me in an antique store in Massachusetts. Philip Harris and his crew are memorialized at the Tablets of the Missing at Honolulu Memorial, Honolulu, Hawaii. If you chance to visit the memorials in Hawaii, please take a moment to find their names. Lieutenant Harris was married but had no children. I've attempted to find his sister's family, but with no luck. So for now, I will keep his handmade wooden box and think of him and his crew this Memorial Day. Freedom most definitely is not free. To honor these men, please take time this Memorial Day to reflect on all of the young men and women that gave their lives to protect generations to come. There are many Memorial Day events happening across the country. Please attend one and let them know that their sacrifice will never be forgotten. All details in this podcast were discovered by research done by me using military genealogy and newspaper search sites. If you can help me to return Lieutenant Harris's wooden box to family, or perhaps to a museum or historical society of that area, please contact me at warandfamily@outlook.com. As always, support our military, both active and veteran status. These men and women sacrifice to protect our country and its ideals, whether in war or peacetime. Until next week, this is Lauren Muse, and thank you for joining me for a very special Warren Family Letters Home.